Now, half of you are going to be screaming at me, probably 90% of you are screaming at me, what are you doing? Let's go into the workshop, we'll take this thing apart and I'll explain the various pieces of it and how it's constructed. Hi, it's Todd from Todd's Workshop and Todd Cutler here, and today we're going to have a really good look at this dagger here. So I'm going to explain the choices I made when I was making it, why I made those choices, a little bit about the history of it and the context of it, where it all fits into the world, and then you're going to watch me put the whole thing together. And stick around for the rest of the video because we've got an amazing announcement about Todd's Workshop coming up. So we're going to start with the origins of it, and it's loosely based on this piece here from the Museum in London. This particular style of knife with the big fat rivets in it seem to be really particular to England and to the lowlands, so modern day Holland. Now, whether they were made there, because there's certainly quite a few there, whether they were made there and then brought to London or not, or whether they were local manufacture here, I don't actually know. I'm not sure if anybody really knows. My guess would be that they were not local manufacture here, but that really is just a guess. But that in itself brings up some interesting points, because this blade at the moment is unmarked. Now, the reason that that's unmarked is the way I've chosen to go about making it. Because it's quite deeply hollow ground, the only way that you can hot mark this is by putting it on a bar of the right diameter, hot stamping it, and that disrupts all of your beautiful hollow ground, so you've got to go again. So this one has been left unmarked, but actually deliberately so, because this piece is based on a piece from the Museum in London. That was a huge trading centre, obviously, and a lot of import, a lot of export. But really interestingly is the knife guilds in London, the cutlers guilds, had the right to destroy any unmarked blades or any foreign-made knife blades. So that means that there's a lot of knives which they just broke them and they disposed of them in the Thames, just as presumably a last farewell, rather rude way of saying screw you. But anyway, that's what they did with them. Lots and lots of pieces ended up in the Thames. Lots of those have ended up in the Museum in London. Many of them, which are unmarked, are broken. So in the spirit of that and where it's come from, it's unmarked. So it's just going to fall right into the whole pattern of the pieces from that museum. But then what I find really fascinating about that is that clearly that same prohibition did not extend to swords, because we were importing, you know, hundreds, thousands of blades, tens of thousands of blades from Solingen and Passau and so on. And of course, Toledo and other places down in Spain, and I'm sure from Italy as well. So there was no shyness about importing sword blades, but for some reason they had a problem with dagger blades. Probably a bit of modern day lobbying going on back then. So let's go into the workshop. We'll take this thing apart and I'll explain the various pieces of it and how it's constructed. So what I neglected to say earlier on actually is this is a mid-15th century rondel, mid to late 15th century. But the other thing that I need to make quite clear is I've been inspired by the Museum of London piece, this piece here, but it is not a slavish copy of it. Part of the reason for that is that I choose to do things differently, not completely abstractly. I use different techniques that I found in other knives of the time. It's just, we're all different craftspeople, and the guy who made this knife in the first place had a particular way that he liked working. I like working in a different way, whatever. So I make slightly different choices. So that means that there are subtle differences, like the way the rondels are put together, and there's more blatant differences, like for instance, this has got 3 rivets, the Museum in London has got 4. But let's start by taking it apart and we'll have a look. So just remove the bottom rondel here, and I'm just going to make it very clear actually, because this is quite important, that I put markings on pieces. Because this is all hand-fettled, handmade, everything sort of will seat slightly differently depending how you do it. Doesn't mean it won't go on the other way around, which it does, but it will just not fit properly because it's been made to be one way. When you're assembling it, you're always in a little bit of a hurry because you're sort of racing glue, curing times and things like that. And we'll come back to glue. And it just helps that everything is marked and everything is precise, and you're not doubting whether you've got something round the right way or not. Let's have a look at this bottom rondel now. Now, if we look at the Museum of London one, you can see here that it's been riveted at this point. So you have effectively a bottom cup and a top plate, and they put a wooden spacer, organic spacer, could be horn or something like that if you want it a bit more stable, but essentially an organic spacer in between it to stop it getting squashed, and then the whole lot's riveted together. You can see, in fact, part of that in the corrosion here, and you can see that what's left of an organic spacer is inside there. So the only purpose for that spacer is that when you rivet it together, it just doesn't crush down. When you peen the whole thing together, it doesn't crush down, because the material this is made from is relatively thin. So the action of peening it can start to deform shapes. you put the organic material in to make it strong. Now, I have brazed it, soldered it. I just happen to like doing that. But also it means that the edges don't open up, because again, if you look at the Museum of London piece, you end up with split lines, visible split lines. And historically, people just didn't seem to care about these kind of details. Is it a nice functional knife? Yes, great, I'll have it. Has it got a couple of splits there that I can see? Yes. Who cares? People care now. So I have to approach jobs slightly differently very often. And actually the Armouries Rondel that we sell for Todd Cutler, I deliberately made it this way, that it has visible split lines on it. The way it's made, there will be split lines visible, because I just, for that piece, I just happened to want to do the proper authentic route on it. And I did. But again, on the Todd's Workshop pieces, very often I don't do that. We have a nice soldered finish here. Again, not perfect. I'm not worried too much about that. Again, you look at historic pieces, you see bits of braze that haven't been cleaned away. You see the silver solder, it's just part of the piece. Then you have this tang here. Now, it's quite a slab of metal. It's been lightened, I suppose, by these whopping big rivets, but I think it's not so much about lightening, it's more fashion. And then this ribbing on the side here. Very distinctive look. I love it, actually, I really do. And then we get our handle scales. Again, they're marked, so I know where they go. So the rivets themselves are just made of sheet brass. So they've got a split down them. Obviously, it's not extruded tube. And they fit in. These rivets at the moment are too long. So I'm going to sand those down before I peen them over. The thing about them, because they are split rivets, they're not a piece of tube. When I splay that open, the split will open as well. There's nothing you can do about that. And that will be visible. And the longer these are, the further out they come from the edge of the grip, and the bigger effectively the turn down, the more visible that split will be. What you want to do is just take these down pretty close, maybe 0.5 millimetre or so, bigger than the handle scale, and then you can peen them down from there. And then we come to the top section. This is going to be one of the things that you're going to absolutely hate. What we've got is blade steel all the way here. So it's EM45, so it's basically like 1060 pretty much, I think. 1070 if that exists. So it's about 0.7% carbon. So it's a good, tough spring steel. But right in the end here, I've welded in a mild steel spigot. So the actual peen is mild steel. Now, that's all been heat treated properly, temperatures have been raised during welding and so on. It's not going to fail, it's fine. The other thing about the peen, of course, is in this application, or most applications, it is purely about tension. It's not about bending. So even if that was microscopically weak, which it's not, it would still do the job that you want. Now, half of you are going to be screaming at me, probably 90% of you are screaming at me, what are you doing welding in mild steel? That's like a crazy thing to do. Well, let's just have a look at this. So first of all, you have to appreciate that modern knife steels are very different to historical ones. The other thing is, historically, they had absolutely no problem with welding in soft iron pieces onto blades. And they did it for exactly the same reasons I do. So if that peen coming through was 1060, a knife steel, even if it's annealed, I'm going to be able to get a very slight peen on that, you know, hammering it over, riveting it over, before it hardens off, work hardens, and will not shift anymore, or will then just shatter. So the thing is, I'm not going to be able to get a very secure peen. So the answer to that, most of the time, and especially if you've got a pommel, you can hot peen it. You can get your oxyacetylene torch onto it, make sure it's red hot when it goes in, add a little bit of heat if you need to, peen it down, job's lovely, nice fat rivet. You can't do that here. You've got a bronze peen button and a very thin sheet here, which if that heats up, that will just deform down, it'll be driven down. Basically, the only way you can put this knife together is for that steel to be a soft steel or an iron. Especially on daggers, that is an important aspect. On swords, most swords, you can get away with a blade steel going all the way through, you can do that, but on delicate little daggers, you have real problems. If you want a decent peen, you've got real problems doing it with the blade steel. That gives us a lovely knife. And that's how the whole thing's been assembled. But what I'm going to do now is take the thing apart, and I'm going to get some epoxy in there. Now again, you're going to hate me for putting the epoxy in, but the epoxy is not to hold this knife together. There is nothing wrong with that. I've peened that now, and this knife is going to stay in one piece. It's going to be fully functional, and it will be absolutely no different. However, horn, as an example, is an organic material. it moves. It gets bigger, it gets smaller. And it's the horn which is clamping this whole thing together effectively. What that means is if I send this knife off to California, or if I send this knife off to, well, England, where it's a bit damper, it's going to behave differently. And the way to avoid that is basically to bond the pieces together. And again, that is not a new thing at all. A vast number of historical pieces are bonded. Not bonded to be structural. It's not to hold the things together. It's just to stop parts moving. It's just to pack spaces out. It's just to fill speedy craftsmanship, whatever it might have been. Whatever reasons there are, there's a number of them. But the point is, if I put a little bit of glue in here, it's going to go to California, wherever it ends up, and it's not going to rattle, and people are going to be happy. If it rattles, people are unhappy. It doesn't matter that things used to be like that. They can't be like that now. So again, I could do it with a cutler's resin, a pitch, and that would be entirely possible. But getting down into here to clean up a hot pitch in there, it's going to be a horrible job. You know, that's going to give me 2 or 3 hours of cleaning to make that thing beautiful. I don't want that, and nobody wants to pay for that. So epoxy it is. So here we go. Let's put the thing together. Hi everyone, I have been making stuff, making loads and loads of stuff. Had a little bit of help, but fundamentally all of this is available. We're going to do a big drop on the website, and all of these pieces are going to be there. So if you want to get in fast, get in early, get the thing you want. Maybe it's an English rondel that you really want. Hollow ground, I mean, who wouldn't want? Maybe it's a nice Landsknecht or 1530s half ring dagger. Looks like it was broken off. Actually, it was made like that. Or maybe you want the world's stupidest long rondel. How about that? Yes, it really did exist. Maybe you want a chain flail. Then you can find out if they really were the most stupidly crazy, dangerous things on the planet. They're not. You just got to know how to use them. Or an Italian rondel. Look at that. Oh, gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous piece. Oh, look at that. Most fabulous Burma. Anyway, I've been making stuff. It's all going to be on its website. Go check it out. Be first. Get the thing you want. So the construction of the Museum of London ones is riveted. You have a cup, effectively, at the bottom here, and then a plate that sits on top, organic spacer in, and then riveted. But a very English way of doing things as well was this style, where you have effectively a top plate and a bottom plate, and the organic spacer is actually visible. In the case of this one, it is based on not a Museum of London dagger, but it was a Thames find. I think it's in a private collection, I believe. But in this one, you have got an organic spacer in the middle here, which in this case is horn, but very often could be wood or could be bone or ivory, depending on the status. But you can see very clearly that it's riveted together. So this construction method is entirely normal for rondels, and either way of doing it is absolutely fine. We're going to strip the knife apart now, and it's a really good idea to keep everything in the correct orientation, because that way you don't have to think about things, you're not going to get confused. It's just going to go right together. So I'm going to start just by seating with a little bit of epoxy at the bottom here. It just helps a little bit, just keeps everything nice and tight. Now, because of this ribbing on the side, I'm going to go a little bit easy with the glue, and there doesn't really need to be very much, to be honest. It's just again, just a packer. I'm going to get a bit in the bottom junction here, and I'll have to suffer that cleaning out that's going to be required. There we go. So just a couple of those in as locators. Now I'm going to go back in on the other side. Again, checking the marks, making sure that everything's good. Okay, so I've got 2 of the rivets in, third one, and I'm going to line up the splits vertically so that they're at the top. Obviously there's no structural reason to do it. It's just a neat reason, isn't it? A little bit of epoxy here. And the pin button on top. And now, I'm going to peen it. I've got aluminium jaws in the vise here. Now, as I peen this, it is going to skid some of the aluminium onto the blade here, which I don't want, but always happens. So I can polish that away, that's fine, but if it's right up under the guard, it's going to be difficult. So rather than peening down here, I peen with the blade quite high, and then I really want to make sure it's not going to go anywhere. So it's nice and tight, and then start with a little ball peen. And this is a very controlled process, so there's no big hammers, it's just lots of very small and precisely delivered taps. So now the thing is together, but if it's not together right, now is the moment to strip it apart very quickly. So I'm just going to check that everything is aligned correctly, which it is. Now the glue is still soft enough, and I'm just going to clamp those scales in now, and I'm going to rivet afterwards. So I'm going to strip this blade out now. There will have been glue around. Oh, not so bad. So there's a little bit of glue fixing on the leather there. But because it's horn, what we can do is get some thinners on there, and that will clean the glue away very well, and it won't damage the horn at all. You've also got a little bit of epoxy just tucked away up at the top there. But at the moment, it's still relatively fresh. Now what that means is it hasn't bonded to the steel very well yet, and it will just peel away really quite easily. So I'm going to go in there with a stick or a piece of bone. Bone is usually quite good because it won't scratch the steel, and it's stiff enough, and you can just pick all that away and then just polish it up with a bit of thinners again. Sharp little piece of bone, and wherever there is epoxy, I'll just pick it away. And it comes out, if you time it right, almost like a long string. I'll be a few minutes. So the knife is all together now and all cleaned up. What we've got to do now is thin the rivets down. So we're going to go next door and do it on a very fine belt linch. So I've got a 150 grit belt in here, a fine belt, because the material in these rivets is very, very thin. It's like 0.3, 0.4 mil. If I put a coarse belt on here, it would just pick up the edge of that material and just rip it apart. So I've got to go gently and slowly with a fine belt. So if you look at the height of those now, and I'm going to take them down, you'll see roughly what we end up with. Okay. And there we are. So they are less than a millimetre proud. Now I'm going to polish those up now, smooth the ends, and then we're going to rivet them out. Perhaps not in the way you expect. Well, it seems to be raining again. So this is my field and my swan Bert. We've got to the stage now where we need to peen these rivets over. We need to turn the ends over because they're not just decorative. The glue, like I said, is not a structural thing. It's just there to stop any slight movement, any rattles. These rivets are what locks the scales in place. So we need to turn the top. But there is an easy way you can do it. And that is, you get a countersink in your drill and you run it in reverse. Really, really, really make sure you run it in reverse. Because if you don't, it's absolute mess. I've got a coarse file in the vise, and I just hold it down and I just spin it up, and it just turns the outside. Not all the way down, but enough that you can just tap it down neatly. And it is such an easy way to do these big rivets. That's it. So I can tap them now. So I don't know how much you can see, but basically they're just starting the journey of being turned. I'll pop them onto a block of wood or aluminium, probably boxwood actually. So I've got a boxwood anvil here, tiny little pin hammer, because it's not going to take much. So the countersink doesn't solve your problems, but it certainly gets you along the journey. You end up with really quite a neat result. So this is where we got to so far. So you can see they're not yet perfect and they're standing a little bit proud, but I'm just going to tap them down onto an anvil face and then they'll be ready for a polish. Got a cute little anvil and I'm just going to tap these down now. And of course, tapping on the top effectively taps the bottom as well, but I'll do both sides. This kind of work, really slow and steady, don't rush anything. And that's it. The knife is done. So, going to give it a polish, and then I'm going to show you the sheath. So that's it. The Museum of London inspired Rondel Dagger. Talking about it, showing you how I put the thing together. It's an interesting piece. But talking of interesting, if you enjoyed this, go and check out the Todd's Workshop website. It is absolutely rammed full of weaponry, medieval goodies, all sorts of stuff that you will love if you've liked this film. We've got a second channel, toddcutler.com, and of course we've got the Patreon page, which helps with some of the bigger projects. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll see you again. Bye.